All right, let's get started. I've had to spend an awful lot of time talking about the tangled history of comics magazine Chesler and Ultim. Let's set all that aside and get back to Dell Comics The Funnies. While Comics Magazine, Chesler, Ultim, and of course the one that started it all, National Allied, are all trying to figure out how to turn a profit producing original comic books, Dell is happily reprinting some of the most popular comic strips of the day. So let's review what some of those were. Our Boarding House was a strip that started back in 1921, but the star of the strip, Major Hoople, did not appear until 1922. Now called Our Boarding House with Mr. Hoople, it gets 4 pages per issue of the Funnies, though not consecutive pages, making it a second-tier feature. Major Hoople does what he does best, tells lies about himself to build himself up, both to himself and to others, gets teased about the domestic violence he suffers because of his wife, tries to steal leftovers from his boarders, and gets mocked because dogs will follow him and bark at him. It's easy to overlook this strip today, but it never evolves beyond its gag-a-day format. Realize that, for the time, a character who saw himself in his mind differently than how everyone else saw him was a lot of character depth for a comic strip character, relatively. Herky was a strip that didn't start until 1935. Herky, short for Hercules, is the name of a baby who exhibits superhuman strength as soon as he's born and super for a baby intelligence, or at least he did when the strip started. Herky is aging faster than the strip is old, and he appears to be at least 3 years old now. Not only has his super strength seemed to have gone away, but his mental capacity seems diminished now too, closer to the other 3-year-olds he plays with, like his girlfriend, or at least a girl who's a friend, Lois. Herky at times resembles a future Linus from the Peanuts, but more often acts like a future Dennis the Menace. His parents often show up in the strip, but they give the boy a lot of latitude, letting him stay out on his own until a curfew of 7 p.m. Herky also never develops into storylines. It's just gag-a-day fare. Dunn, Secret Operative 48, is a strip that started in 1933, and it was the first Dick Tracy clone in comics. It's a first-tier strip in this comic book with 4 consecutive pages. Dan has a girlfriend, Kay, who takes the place of Tess Trueheart, an adopted daughter called Babs, who substitutes for Dick Tracy's adopted son, Junior. He has a comic relief partner named Irwin, subbing in for Tracy's pal, Pat Patton. Just about the only thing unique to Dan is his loyal sidekick, a dog named Wolf, who is sometimes as much the star of the strip as Dan is. Dan is also less lethal than Dick Tracy. Dan often faces the same villains coming back for more, like a mob boss named Dake, or Dakey, I'm not sure, or the Yellow Peril spy Wu Fang. Like Dick Tracy, this is a story-oriented strip, but there's also a lot less action in these stories, with characters often standing around and talking to each other at length. Mutt Jeff, debuting back in 1907, is the oldest strip I've talked about. It is, in fact, the source for the very concept of a multi-panel strip that sets up for a gag. For the first half year, it was just a strip about Mutt, Augustus Mutt. The diminutive Jeff was added to serve as a partner, co-conspirator, or foil for Mutt, depending on the needs of the gag. Though there is no story, there's a little bit of continuity to the strip. Mutt is married, and his wife periodically figures into the gags, and a son named Cicero who gets mentioned more than he's seen. Mutt and Jeff are often, though not always, unemployed gamblers. In the first page of Mutt and Jeff we see in this range of issues, they are apparently wealthy men belonging to the same gentleman's club. In another page, Jeff has a pet elephant, just for that day's gag, and then the elephant disappears. Mutt and Jeff lasted in newspapers for 75 years, but his popularity peaked in the 1920s. I've mentioned many times about how Little Orphan Annie was the megastar of 1930s popular culture, while Mutt and Jeff were its megastars in the 1920s. Now, in 1937, Mutt and Jeff rates 3 pages of content spread through the book, so bit of a drop. I've mentioned topper strips before, separate shorter strips that were sold in partnership with the strip that ran beneath or sometimes above them, often by the same creator. Mutt and Jeff was sold with Cicero's Cat, a 1-row strip focused on Cicero's pet cat and his non-speaking antics. Unusual for a topper, Cicero's cat sometimes got 2 rows of panels. I think of Cicero as a less funny Heathcliff before Heathcliff, for those of us who remember Heathcliff. I have briefly mentioned Boots once before. Boots, also known as Boots and Her Buddies, is sort of like Dixie Dugan, and that is a slice of life strip about an attractive, much pursued young woman, but Boots is different because her would-be suitors are all regular supporting cast. Boots had humble origins back in 1924. Until 1931, it never had its own Sunday page, but served as the topper for other Sunday strips. In fact, for 5 years, it was the topper for Our Boarding House. Boots is a college girl and her buddies are all her male classmates, but given the stereotype of women in college at the time, she's there to find a husband, not a career, and her interests are just fashion. There are occasional story arcs, but most of the time it's a slapstick farce as the suitors compete for her attention. Although her strip lasted for 43 years, well past college life, and she'll later marry, settle down, and have a kid, not unlike another similar strip called Blondie, her popularity peaked, like Mutt Jeff, during the 1920s when the Boots bob was briefly a national popular hairstyle. Now, like Mutt Jeff, it gets 3 pages spread throughout the book. Captain Easy, I've talked about plenty, but I can never resist an excuse to revisit Roy Crane art. We're in the middle of the Gold of the Frozen North storyline when 1937 begins. Just look at this one page with this unconventional panel layout with the solid black trees and how the second row of panels flows backwards from right to left so that these 2 rows become an endless loop to suggest how long this hunting party has been wandering. On this page, there's the juxtaposition of the tranquil scene inside compared to the chaotic scene outside, and the juxtaposition of these 2 panels showing Easy attacking men at the window in different ways. Or this page with the chase scene on skis constantly switching direction in order to heighten the drama and sense of movement. Sheer genius, worthy of even better than the 4 consecutive pages that Captain Easy gets. If I started describing a gang of scrappy, street-smart, and independent children played for laughs and told from their perspective, you might think I was referring to Our Gang, also known as the Little Rascals, but debuting in comic strips 5 years before Our Gang in 1917 was Reg'lar Fellers. While none of the Reg'lar Fellers have the charisma of Spanky, Alfalfa, and Darla from the peak Little Rascal years, its popularity once rivaled the Little Rascals. Reg'lar Fellers was adopted into a feature film, a radio series, and 2 animated cartoons as theatrical shorts. Plus that sweet merchandising money that really marks something as a success. A very young Dick Van Patten starred in the radio program, and the Alfalfa actor from the Little Rascals, Carl Switzer, did double duty on the Reg'lar Fellers roster. I'm going to stop there with just 8 examples. There were more features in the funnies I didn't get to. If you go back and read them, which we can all do on hosting websites like Comic Book Plus and Digital Comic Museum, let me know in the comments section if you really liked one that I skipped. Also remember to like this video before you go, and bye for now.